Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Remote Braille Challenge Finals webinar series. My name is Bradley Day. I am the youth instructor at our San Diego Regional Center of the Braille Institute, and I will be the moderator today. This is our second webinar in the series, titled Successful Outcomes Start with Braille Literacy, presented by the American Printing House for the Blind. Thank you to everyone who attended our webinar yesterday, presented by Humanware, and we are excited to share today's webinar with you. We will be hearing from our presenter shortly, but I'd like to start with a little house cleaning and announcements. First, thank you all for being here. A huge congratulations to all of our Braille Challenge finalists, and congratulations on finishing your testing for the first ever Remote Braille Challenge Finals. We are all truly so proud of you, and you should be proud of yourselves. Also in attendance, we have the following: proctors who volunteered to help make this challenge happen and went above and beyond for their finalists. Braille Challenge regional coordinators who made the entire Braille Challenge program possible each year. And teachers, staff, volunteers, program partners, and many more who together create a network of support for all the students that you serve. I would also like to explain the platform we are using to conduct this webinar, Microsoft Teams. As an attendee, no video or audio of you will be shared. You will only be viewing the webinar. However, you can still participate. To interact, there is a chat feature that you can use to ask questions. Either tab until you find the Ask Question button, or if you are using a mouse, you can find on the Ask Question button on the right side of your screen. Throughout the presentation, we will allow for questions to be made, which we will answer at the end. You have the ability to send questions at any time then, using during the webinar. You do not need to do so at the end only during our Q&A section. But we will only make questions public during that Q&A section. Thus, if you submit a question but you do not see it in the public chat, please know that we are seeing your questions, but are waiting to make them public until the Q&A portion. Other than the question feature, there is nothing else you need to know regarding Teams. Just sit back and enjoy the webinar. We encourage everyone here to attend the rest of our webinar series this week as well. We have one webinar each day through Thursday, and I'll share more details at the end. Also, please tune in to our live stream awards ceremony next Friday, July 31st, 2 p.m., streamed on our YouTube page at youtube.com/Braille Institute. It is now my pleasure to introduce our webinar presenters from the American Printing House for the Blind. We have Greg Stilson, APH Head of Global Innovation, Jessica Minneci, Communication Specialist and a former Braille Challenge winner, Joe Hodge, Software Quality Assurance Analyst, and as our moderator, Paul Ferrara, Communication Accessibility Editor. Without further ado, I present to you the Remote Braille Challenge Finals webinar, Successful Outcomes Start with Braille Literacy, presented by the American Printing House for the Blind. And I turn the time over to Paul Ferrara. Paul, the mic is yours.
All right, thank you very much, Bradley. This is Successful Outcomes Start with Braille Literacy. Thank you for attending today. As Bradley's already said, my name is Paul Ferrara, Communications Accessibility Editor at APH. And our panelists, also from APH, Greg Stilson, Joe Hodge, and our three-time National Braille Challenge qualifier, Jessica Minneci. And all of them are going to talk to you about the importance of Braille throughout their lives. So let's get this started. All the questions that I have are going to go to each one of them. I'll just direct the order so we can change that up a little bit so everybody's not answering at the same time, or someone's always first and someone's always last. But we will start with Jessica, since she is a Braille Challenge participant. So the first question to all of you is this. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your job title, education, career highlights, anything you think we ought to know just to know a little bit about who you are. So Jessica?
Hello, everybody. My name is Jessica Minneci, and as Paul said, I was a 3-time national qualifier for the Braille Challenge in 2012, 2014, and 2015. I'm visually impaired myself, and I am working a 4-year-old guide dog named Joyce. I thought I'd put her in there, as she's pretty important in my life. I grew up in a suburb of Chicago called Naperville, moved around a little bit, lived in Pennsylvania, went to college there. I went to a small liberal arts college called Seton Hill. It is 40 minutes outside of Pittsburgh, and I majored in creative writing with a minor in communication. Then I actually ended up moving to Louisville and found an internship at APH, and the rest is history. So now I work as the communications associate, so I do a lot of our product brochures, web descriptions, and product blogs. So you'll find me at APH. I also edit our newsletter that comes out every month called APH News.
All right, great, thank you. Greg, what about you?
Thanks, Paul. I'm Greg Stilson. I am not a 3-time Braille Challenge winner. I'll tell you that right now. I was always the kid who used Braille but was a tremendously slow reader. I came to APH in January of this year. I've been in the field of assistive technology for the past 16 years. It makes me feel super old. I spent 12 of those years at Humanware, the organization you heard from yesterday from a good friend of mine, Peter Tusik. And I ended up running the product department there. I was involved in the creation of hopefully some of the products that you use, the Brilliant Braille displays, the Braille Note Touch, the Victor Reader products, and the Trekker products as well. So I was really proud to have been part of the team to create those really awesome devices. The last couple years I spent at a startup. I had the privilege of kind of changing careers a little bit and moving over to a startup still in the assistive technology industry, but a little bit different. It was a company called IRA, looking at how really modern technology, smartphones and things like that, and all the cameras and sensors that we wear on our body every single day, how that can be used to really help somebody who's blind or low vision in their everyday life. With sort of on-demand sighted assistance. And I came to APH this January. When I was working at IRA, I was not as involved in the education field as I had been when I was with Humanware. And as I realized, with education not being part of my everyday life, I realized I tremendously missed it. And working with you students and parents and TVIs and everybody in the field. So when the opportunity came up to really focus on global innovation here at APH and kind of solving a lot of the big problems that we all face as a blind person myself, it was something that I couldn't say no to. So super happy to be here. I've had the pleasure of speaking at the Braille Challenge several times, so really excited to talk to all of you.
Great, thank you. And Joe, tell us about yourself, if you would.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Joseph Hodge. So I grew up, I had retinal blastoma when I was a year old. Lost my sight then. So grew up on a farm in Indiana near Fort Wayne, and went to Ball State University and got my college degree, and then worked as a independent traveler for a grant program for older blind individuals in Indiana. I always kind of wanted to leave Indiana, so I took a job in Louisville at Humana, doing insurance, worked there for 7 years, and then got just kind of looked at job listings at the American Printing House, applied for being a quality assurance analyst, and was able to come to work, and now I get to test software, hardware, do a lot of fun things that I've always just had an interest in, just never really got the chance to do it. So it's been fun, and I'm looking forward to kind of talking to you guys and being. I actually help out every year at the Kentucky Braille Challenge, so just kind of getting a chance to be here is really awesome.
All right, thanks for letting us know a little bit about yourselves. Let's start talking about Braille and how you began to learn Braille and some of the challenges you may have had with it. Greg, let's start with you. When did you learn Braille?
So when I was a kid, I was born with Leber's congenital amaurosis, LCA. Was really born with a lot of vision. I was sort of that kid that I didn't get diagnosed until I was about 3, and luckily, because I had awesome parents who were advocates, and we knew that I was going to lose a lot of my vision. We just didn't know when. My parents were really forward thinking and basically made me learn all of the, I would say, blindness skills from day one. So as soon as I was diagnosed, they started having me walk around with a little white cane, and I started learning Braille at first grade time frame, and hated every minute of it. Right, I was the low vision kid. I didn't want to use Braille. I had no desire to do any of that, but they pushed me, and I had an awesome TVI who pushed me. And looking back on it today, as somebody who has virtually no usable vision today, it was the greatest thing that ever happened to me. And I'm super passionate about making sure that all the TVIs that I made their lives miserable at that point know that, right? That this is one of those moments where, and especially as a blind, I'm married to a woman who's also blind, and we have 2 kids who are sighted. And so today, when you look at being able to read books to your kids, I'm using Braille today more than I've ever used it in my entire life, because I'm supporting the education of my kids. I'm supporting, product presentations and things like that, and demonstrations and speeches that I do throughout my career. I'm all using Braille now for that. So it's looking at that, it's pretty incredible the impact that forcefully teaching your kid Braille at at first grade made.
All right, and Joe, what about you? When did you learn Braille?
So I lost my sight when I was a year old, as I stated. So pretty much my parents were also very forward thinking, took the initiative to reach out to TVI in the area through our Northeastern Center where I grew up. And she would come out during kind of the preschool, about 4 years old, start teaching me on a pin board. So I had pins I'd stick in this board, and I could feel the sort of dots. They sort of represented the Braille dots. And then as I grew up, kindergarten, I started kind of more messing with paper Braille and the Perkins Braille Writer. I also had the fortunate, there was a guy in the community who had cancer, and he had heard about me, and he donated the first piece of technology I ever got. It was a Braille and Speak. So when I was in kindergarten, I had a Braille and Speak, which was basically it was an input device that spoke. You could input Braille, and it would speak out what you wrote. And I was actually carrying that to kindergarten. So fast forward to now, much like Greg, for a while when I was working at Humana, I kind of stopped reading Braille. I would use it in my job to read the screen, but now I'm reading a lot of books and newspapers. So it's Braille has, I'm really glad that I struggled through the early childhood aspect of Braille. It took me a while to kind of master grade 2 in particular. I think I finally finished it off in the 4th grade, but it really has played a huge part in my life.
And what about you, Jessica?
Well, I was lucky enough to learn Braille when I was in kindergarten. I actually was in an all visually impaired classroom in a public school. So we were in that classroom, 95% of the day learning Braille in kindergarten, and then we were in what they call mainstream class with everybody else who could see for the rest of the day. So luckily I was in that school district until I was almost in 6th grade. So I had a teacher all the time who was there to teach me Braille or to help me with things and issues that I had. and I also had friends who were learning Braille with me, so I wasn't alone. And I think that's why Braille has really been a huge thing in my life, not just because of what it offers, but also the community that I was a part of growing up. You know, I was a part of a community where the kid next to me was learning Braille. It wasn't just me. So I felt included in that sense. And I read voraciously as a kid. I never stopped reading. The first challenging read was the first Harry Potter book that I read when I was in 3rd or 4th grade. And I remember my teacher going, "That's a little bit challenging for you." And I said, "No, it won't be." So that's how I got started with Braille. And I've been reading it ever since. Like I said, I was in the Braille Challenge. I actually started in 2008 back at regionals in Illinois. And then I was proctored by my TVI in Pennsylvania because there wasn't a regional round. And so Braille has just taken over. It's also taken over in college. I read a lot of audiobooks, but I also used Braille as much as I could, and I think that's true in my career as well. When you're editing a product description, you want to make sure the commas are in the right place, the bullets are there, everything is crisp and nice, and I don't see another way that you could do it without Braille. So Braille has always been a huge part of my life.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Now, you all have covered this a little bit, but let's expand upon this a little bit more when it comes to your education. Now, this can be from early on, even up through college. Tell us how Braille has impacted your time in school at any setting. Joe, we'll start with you.
That's a great question. So one thing I like to think about is in elementary, middle school, high school, I had Braille textbooks. So like Jessica was saying, I went to a public school and I had one room that was for all of my books. I mean, so as you all probably know, a math book is 40 or 50 volumes of Braille. So I would go into this room, pick my book, and go sit in class and read. Of course, when I went to college, this is where it got a little harder because, well, I mean, I had to have a dorm room with someone else. They weren't going to give me my own, and even if they did, I wouldn't probably be able to house all of the volumes of Braille that it would require for the college books. So I had to move over and transition to refresher Braille. So basically, a refreshable Braille display. I got the Braille note, and I was able to read my books that way. So that transition was probably the hardest because I no longer had a physical volume sitting in front of me like everyone else. Kids would go to the college bookstore, get their books, and I would still have to go buy the book, but then scan it in myself and then put it into a doc file or a BRF so I could read it. And it was a lot of work to do that for a college book, but at the time, it was sort of the cutting edge, and it felt great that I could do that and then read along with everybody else in class or outside of class and didn't have to necessarily have like a reader. So I've always enjoyed that aspect of Braille.
Thank you. Jessica, what about you?
So in terms of Paul, you asked about Braille in the educational setting, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. I was similar to Joe. I had, Braille at school all through K through 12, and when I was a senior in high school, my TVI said to me, well, college is going to be different for you. You're not going to have Braille all the time. I mean, you can request your books, but as you guys know, sometimes professors don't give you the book list until a couple weeks before the semester starts, and that's not enough time to get your books in Braille. In college, I was fortunate enough to have my Italian book in Braille and my psychology textbook in Braille, but other than that, it was reading all the time. And as an English major with 200 pages to read, it's going to take me a really long time to read Braille, so I had to rely on the audio aspect of it just so that I could get things done quicker and not spend all-nighters every night. But Braille was still a really important part of my life. I got the Braille Note Empower when I was in 5th grade. I had a gentleman at the Chicago Lighthouse teach me how to use it, and I did everything I could. And luckily for me, the Braille Note Touch came out when I was a sophomore in college, and I actually had some scholarship money that I used towards it. And that was a game changer, because all of a sudden I didn't have to convert my docs, my Braille.brl docs to docx files. They were already there on my Braille Note Touch. I could just create them and put them where I needed to put them. So technology, thankfully for me, that was a game changer, and that really helped me as a Braille reader, because it gave me access to Braille that I wouldn't have had otherwise.
Oh, thank you very much. Greg, what about you?
So I would say Braille early on, when I was learning the spatial orientation and formatting of documents, and reading early literature books and things like that, understanding what a heading looked like, understanding what an indentation looked like. Hard copy Braille was vital at that point, and I to date, until we have that magic full-page Braille display textbook that that provides some level of tactile representation, there's still no replacement for that. And today, I'm a stickler for formatting, and I look back at it and I think it's probably because I was forced to look at so much hard copy Braille when I was a kid and learn about what a center alignment looked like, and what a heading looked like, and what bullets look like in Braille, and things like that, right? So so much of my early Braille instruction was not just learning the code, but understanding the spatial orientation and spatial understanding of a page of text, right? And so, and I think today, that's one of my biggest, I would say, more pet peeves when I receive some emails and such from other folks who are blind, is you receive content that is really not formatted. You don't get, everything's kind of all jumbled together. There's a lot of people that just use dictation. So one of the things that I learned early on was that spatial understanding, and I totally attribute that to Braille. Science and math was really my big use case for Braille. I was in a lot of the AP higher level science and math classes, and spatial orientation and understanding is vital when you're doing things like matrices and understanding table of values and things like that in math. That's all spatial, right? And when you're doing writing proofs, which I still have nightmares about in math, right? Like, you have a lot of spatial, you have to make sure that things are organized spatially correct, right? And I use the old Perkins Brailler to do that. And in science classes and things like that, understanding, even when you look at simple things like the periodic table of elements, right? I remember very clearly looking at that in hard copy Braille and understanding the way that was organized. As time progressed, I started really focusing a lot on multimodal use, so understanding audio. I obviously can listen to text way faster than I can read it. I am not a fast Braille reader even to this day, and I when I'm reading to my daughter, I'll often make up half the story just to go faster at times. So, but we, I read well enough to get the content, and most importantly, when I was doing those science, especially computer programming classes, understanding syntax and reading those actual punctuation symbols, especially in computer programming, was crucial, right? And to date, when I look at college and the math that I did in college and the programming classes and such, I don't see a way that I could have done that without Braille at that point. And then we'll get into where refreshable Braille kind of fit into that later on.
All right, perfect. Thank you. I have one more question before we get into something a little bit different. So we'll start with you again, Jessica, and you've covered this a little bit, but tell us, now that you're a professional, how Braille fits into your career.
Oops. I think I'm muted.
We hear you.
Oh, I wasn't sure if I was muted or not. Okay, great. I'd love to. So as I talked a little bit about earlier, technology kind of came to the forefront when I was in junior high school, college age. So right in the middle of my schooling experience. So now that I am a working professional, like Greg was saying, formatting has become really important in my career. So when I'm writing a blog, I need to know, where the heading is, what level heading it should be, and what the font style needs to be. And as much as I love audio, I am definitely a Braille reader. So if I'm listening to a document or proofing it, I need that Braille in front of me to know that it's right. Otherwise, I will second guess myself forward and back. Braille is also really important in my career because, like I said, as I'm proofing, I need to know what a comma looks like, where it should be, and how the sentences flow together. Because when you're listening to audio and it's really fast, sometimes you miss something. Sometimes you realize that you have two sentences that are next to each other and they're both compound sentences, or one sentence is too long or one sentence is too short. You don't really notice that when you're listening than you do when you're reading. So that's really important to me as a communicator and as a writer. And I also want to use the best words possible. So if I'm listening to something and I hear it, it might sound great. But if I'm reading it, like I said again, I'll be like, oh no, there's a different word that I need to put here. There's a more precise way of writing this. So that's become really important in my career. And like Greg was saying, refreshable Braille is one of the best new steps in technology because you can take these pieces of technology with you. And I think that is the most important thing because previously you'd be lugging books with you everywhere. And while books are great, they're heavy. But if you have, I don't know, a 2-pound Braille display in your backpack, that's going to weigh less on your shoulders and it'll give you more versatility. If you have a flash drive in there with documents that are really long, you can go line by line. It might not be as ideal as feeling a full page of Braille, but at least it's something and at least it's there. So that's what I use Braille for in my career, writing emails, doing all of my product descriptions and brochures and blogs, but also making sure that all the formatting and everything that I have is right spatially and grammatically.
All right, thank you for that. Greg, what about you?
So a lot of what I do is when we're not in a pandemic. I feel like I start a lot of sentences like that. When we're not in a pandemic, life was normal. When we're not in a pandemic, I would do a lot of travel and I would do a lot of public speaking at various conferences, organizations, things like that. For the longest time, when I would do public speaking, I tried to have a really, really long headphone cable because as I was going through PowerPoint slides and things like that, what I would use the headphone for is I'd have JAWS or the screen reader running at that point and listen to each of the bullets, and they would be my talking points. I never really progressed as a public speaker, as somebody who's blind, that way. I do not have an attention span. My wife says that I am your typical male in that progress. So I cannot focus on more than one thing at a time. And so when I am trying to listen and speak, I really struggled, and I could tell that I was getting distracted. I would lose my train of thought a lot and often really kind of just run on and on and on. It was a colleague of mine. We were developing a new Braille device that was a smaller Braille display, and I started basically telling myself that I was going to use that device to start. It was supposed to connect to your computer or to your mobile device and be able to work with PowerPoint files. And so I started doing that. And then as we worked on the Braille Note Touch in 2014-15, one of the cool things the Touch could do was play PowerPoint files. And so I started really focusing on the aspect of reading my talking points when I would do public speaking. And it was an absolute game changer. The light bulb went on, and I realized that I could speak without being distracted. I could make my points more efficiently, and I could really publicly speak in the same fashion that a sighted person does, right? And it was one of those freeing moments where I realized that this this can, I really can do this. I don't have to feel like I'm fighting myself every single time. So I would say the most impactful thing that Braille does for me today is whenever I do presentations, whenever I do webinars, a lot of webinars today, right? So a lot of webinars I'm doing, sharing slides and things like that. I'm using Braille with all of those, right? And even the list of questions here, I have it on the Mantis Braille display on my lap. And so, you know, keeping those, like I said, I don't read large quantities of Braille very fast, but for talking points, for 1 or 2 display length things that can jog my memory and things like that, it has become a godsend for me to be able to do that. So that's really where I would say Braille plays the largest role for me.
All right, and finally, what about you, Joe?
So in my first job, I didn't really get a chance to use Braille too much. So, I mean, just getting speech on a computer at the time, the company basically said, that's all we're going to pay for. My Braille note had broken down from college. So for my first job, I really never got to use Braille. Then when I went to Humana, so I kind of had this mindset of, oh my gosh, Braille, you know, I learned this whole thing and now I'm never going to use it again because I'm an adult. And then I got my job at Humana, and I'll explain quickly how that worked. So I took calls. So I had JAWS in one ear and I had calls in the other. And when you listen to both for 8 hours at a time, when you get home, you don't want to hear anything else. It wears you out. So one thing that Braille did for me, especially while on the calls, is I could relieve speech when a customer is giving you their email or their phone number, I could read that in Braille. And I started going, oh wow, this is now becoming a bigger part of my life, other than just, you know, using it for hotel rooms and elevators and such. So transition to APH. I came in and we start we're kind of working on Braille displays, and I literally have gotten to use a Braille display now for every day, and I have, you know, 3 or 4 in my house now, and it is just it's amazing because I can relax personally and just read a book rather than have things coming at my ears all day. With speech, with just the way that we have to interact with things, sometimes just that extra little unwind helps. And as Jess, Greg have all kind of mentioned, just reading an email for formatting, reading a Word document for formatting is just so key for me personally now, because I do a lot of work with just checking over specs and checking over different things to do with software. So having that information at my fingertips is great.
These are really great answers. Really appreciate the thoughtfulness and the depth of your answers. And let's now go to something else. We've got a demo here that Joe's going to provide for us. If you want to tell us about that, Joe.
Yes, so one of the Braille displays that I am going to actually have sitting right here, I'm going to hold it up here so you guys can maybe see it. We were going to try to do a sound demo, but with Teams, it just wasn't working with my Mac. We're going to do the next best thing. So this is a 20-cell refreshable Braille display that we've made in partnership with Humanware. So one thing that I like to do, Greg is going to go ahead and give you the specs. I just want to give you kind of a quick demo and sort of tell you how I use it just personally. So one thing that is really neat about this Braille display that I like, and Greg points out in a lot of demos, is how easy it is to connect to Bluetooth. So in years past with Braille displays, what you would have to do is go into VoiceOver and then choose Braille and then have it search for the Braille display. Well, if you're a parent out there that's just got a Braille display for their kid, you're like, why isn't it in Bluetooth? Like, I don't see it at all. So this Braille display can actually connect through Bluetooth in the normal way, which is amazing. It's one of those features that you don't realize how great it is until you get it. So I'm going to turn up I got my iPad here. So I'm going to go into settings.
Speed test. Audio up. Start AirPlay now.
I actually have my app switcher here. So
App switcher. Settings. Settings.
Now,
settings.
On my Braille display, we have 4 thumb keys on the front. So I'm on the editor right now. I'm in what's called local mode. So I'm going to just arrow down 1 to terminal. I'm going to press enter. and then I'm going to press the thumb key once that says Bluetooth, but I don't have it connected yet, so I'm not going to go there right now. I'm going to forward one more time to add Bluetooth, and I'm going to press enter, and now it's in pairing mode. So on my iPhone, or sorry, on my iPad, I am going to, and I just hit the home key when I was laying it down, so let me just do that again. There we go. I'm going to go to
keyboard,
Bluetooth here, which I'm not in.
Airplane mode, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth,
and then
heading.
Down at the very bottom,
Magic Quirky Writer, more other in progress.
We'll see
in progress.
Chameleon here in a
heading.
second.
In progress. Heading.
And while Joe's doing that, if for those of you who can see my video, and Matt, if you want to spotlight my videos as Greg, I've got the Chameleon shown on the from the document camera, and Matt, please jump in if visually you can't see it or if it's lined up okay.
All is good there.
In progress.
So what we're seeing
heading.
here is
heading.
And while Joe's kind of getting his technology, that's the beauty of doing demos during COVID, is trying to broadcast all of your stuff while trying to do a webinar. Well, he's getting it to recognize the pairing here. What I'll do is kind of walk through sort of the specs of what the device looks like. So visually, for those of you who can see, you have 20 cells of refreshable Braille on the device. You do have cursor router keys above each of the cells, and we see the value there significantly because any of you who've used refreshable Braille devices with cursor router keys, it allows you, and Jess mentioned this when she does a lot of her editing, right, is being able to recognize punctuations, right? So as I'm reading across, if I reach a cell that has an incorrect spelling or an incorrect punctuation, I can just simply slide my finger straight up, tap the cursor router key, and press the delete key at that point and delete it. In the same fashion that a sighted person, when they're reading a document, let's say they're going through a Microsoft Word file and they see an error or anything like that, they can point and click with their mouse, and at that point they're able to instantly delete or modify or edit whatever. So that's really why we're so passionate about those cursor router keys, and that's not something that we wouldn't be willing to sacrifice those for anything, because it's one of those things that gives you the freedom to edit in the same fashion that a sighted person does. You have the Perkins Braille keyboard, the 8-dot keyboard above. So you have dot 7 all the way to the left, dots 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and dot 8 are the enter key all the way on the right. On the left side of the device, you have a USB host port. So you're able to plug in a USB thumb drive. Right behind it, you have an on-off button, and then a USB-C charging port that's behind it, so that you can charge using a standard cable. That the nice thing about USB-C is you can flip it upside down or right side up, and you don't end up breaking it or bending any pins, things like that. Behind, on the back edge, you have an SD card slot that can hold up to 64 gigabytes of storage as well. So this device, and I'll go through more of the applications in detail, but this device has not just external intelligence of being able to connect to other tools and things like that, but it also has internal intelligence as well. So you don't have to be connected to other devices to do some of the basic things you need to do. So I'll flip it back over to Joe. Joe, how we doing there, buddy?
Good. It's fun of being a QA, Greg.
Right, man. Did you find a bug? I love it. I hope you found a bug.
I did. So we'll have to look at that later. Yeah. So what I've done here is I got it paired, and so Greg was mentioning the thumb keys. So on the front, you can actually hit the left or right outer thumb key and move by element on the screen, and the iPad will move with it. So what you can do here, the Braille displays also have, with iOS or different operating systems, have different commands. So like, for example, on the iPhone, you can press H.125 with space at the same time. That'll take you home. So if I hit that, that will actually take me to my home screen. And you'll actually hear VoiceOver say,
Voice Stream Reader.
There we go. So now,
tap to open.
I'm going to go into this app called Voice Stream Reader, which allows you to connect with services like Bookshare and a lot of other ones. I mainly use Bookshare with it. So in here, I'm going to turn up my iPad all the way here.
New, Fort Laramie and the Pageant of the...
There we go. I have a bunch of books here that I've been reading. Some are new, some I've actually started reading. So on the Braille display, I'm going to hit the left thumb key to go back one.
No reading, missing pieces. Heather Gudenkoff.
Now,
About
the
4
cursor
hours,
routing key,
59 minutes.
the cursor routing key that Greg just mentioned, I'm going to go ahead and hit that above the N here.
Library. Button.
And we've opened the book. So now if I scroll down with the Braille display,
Document. Controls. Button.
I'm just moving down the screen.
Heading. Audio settings. Visual settings. Add bookmark. 1. Text. A woman uncovers earth-shattering secrets about her husband's family in this chilling page-turner from New York Times
So now
bestselling.
you hear the speech, but if I don't want that, I can actually just
Speech off.
mute the speech, and then with 2-finger double tap, and then I can hold the Braille display up here, and I'm going to start scrolling the Braille. So as I'm doing this, I'm hitting now the inside thumb key on the right to pan forward. And I'm actually not reading this right now, but you can actually hopefully see the Braille moving here as I scroll. So this would then, and I'll actually touch the screen here in a second, just so you can kind of hear the speech. It's going to be in a different place than where I stopped it. But as I do this, it's going to display on screen the text of the book, and then where I can actually read it. So on an iPad, which is the same device as anyone else uses, I can actually have access to millions of books. When I was a kid, it really is a dream come true, because I remember just the access to having books in Braille was so limited that this just makes a difference here. So when I touch this, I'm gonna actually hit the thumb key here. Hold on a second.
Speech on.
There we go. I'm gonna do
Headings.
There we go.
Bookmarks. Text. A woman uncovers earth-shattering
So
secrets
the speech
about...
doesn't move because obviously I was reading in Braille, but the point is you can actually then save your position with the Braille in this app and just continually to read. So technically a lot of the time I'll read in Braille to a certain point, and then maybe I'm on the go or eating lunch or something, and I'll switch over to speech, and then I can jump back over to Braille. So it's a really nice app to do this. The other thing to note with iOS or just any pretty much computer system right now, because I did a hard reset on my iPad earlier, I am actually in grade 1 Unified English. You can change the code that displays on the Braille display here on the iOS device. So you can do that in settings, voice over Braille, and you can actually change and tweak a lot of the settings. So this has kind of just been a quick little demo to show you the power of this Chameleon. But with these two devices here, I actually have the power to read anything I could want. So it pretty much, just briefly to summarize, it's going to show visually in Braille what you guys see visually. So it really is a pretty cool thing. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Greg. He'll kind of go through some of the applications and more of the specs on the devices.
Awesome. So, when we look at why we did this, so the Chameleon, the version that you're looking at on screen is just a plain black device. I didn't get the final painted version that looks all nice. I got the prototype version that product managers always get, but it works the same way. What's really cool about the Chameleon is that it was designed for students, right? It was designed for kids to be able to carry around in their backpack, and we designed it to try to basically internally, not when you're connected to other devices, but internally, if you're just using the device by itself, to cover a lot of the basic things that a student needs to do on their desk, right? So if you look at what a sighted kid generally does in the classroom, right? They generally, the tools that they're using are notebook and pen and paper to take their notes. There's probably a calculator, a basic calculator they're using. There's a clock so that they can check their time. They have textbooks. And they most likely have a file organization system, folders and things like that, assignment notebooks and things like that. So we took all those things and we tried to put them inside of one device for a blind student to be able to keep themselves organized in class and to be able to do a lot of the basic things they need to do, right? So on the device, when you look at the Chameleon itself, the Chameleon is basically a very linear structure when you first turn it on. And as Joe mentioned, HumanWare is our partner. And so they have a very familiar sort of interface that HumanWare uses for a lot of their devices, and we really like that device, or that structure that they use, and that's that kind of main menu and then offshoots of main menu to really, it's a very linear type of approach, right? So on my display right now, I just turned it on and I land on the device's home menu or main menu, and the first thing I see is the editor. If I use the next thumb key, I see Braille terminal. I see the library. So this is another application that we can, as Joe is using an external app on his iPad to be able to read books from Bookshare and things like that. What's really cool about the Chameleon device is that APH partnered with Bookshare as well to be able to download books directly in Braille to this device. And you don't need to be connected to anything. You just need to have a Wi-Fi connection, because the device does have internal Wi-Fi capabilities as well. If I keep going down the list, we have a file manager so that students can create those file organizational skills, those assignment notebook skills that all the sighted students create by actually putting physical assignments into folders, right? So there is a file manager on this. There's a basic calculator. This is your typical 4-function calculator, not a scientific or a graphing calculator, just a regular 4-function calculator. There's your date and time checker. And then you have your settings. So it does, as Joe mentioned, connect to Bluetooth. It does connect to USB. The reason why we're talking about this is because APH is, and I hope you all know who APH is, but we are a really, from low tech to high tech, we are a resource for students with visual impairments throughout the United States. And for us, we're expanding, part of my title is global product innovation or global innovation. And really the purpose there is we want to be a resource for everybody, regardless of where they reside in the world. So when we look at this product, it is available. It just came out, Paul, last Wednesday, right? So we started shipping last Wednesday. It is available on the quota schedule, so that it is covered by the quota dollars that school districts get to buy products from APH for students with visual impairment. So the Chameleon is there, and it's a tool that we really look forward to seeing what students do with it. It being able to take your notes in class, and like I said, this is not a full note taker. You're not writing elaborately formatted Microsoft documents. There's other devices for that. Jessica mentioned that she used a Braille Note Touch. There's note takers out there that really excel in those creating professional documents on a specialized tool. This is really the goal here, is that the student takes their notes in class. They do like a sighted person does. They go back to their computer or other device later on and they write their professionally formatted document to turn into the teacher at that point. And they can use that connected to their computer, to their iPad, to their Android device, down the road to the Chromebook. So that's really our intention, is being able to do some of the work that you need to do in class on this device without it connecting in anything else, but then ultimately using those transferable skills to learn how to use a computer or one of those other mainstream tools with Braille at your fingertips at all times. So that's a brief overview of the Chameleon. One of the cool things about this device, why it's called the Chameleon, is it does ship with 3 different colored cases, a teal, a purple, and a pomegranate colored cases. And students, one of the things that we heard from teachers and students was that ironically, you're looking at a device that is all black here, but it's the final product is actually a green color. I think it's a teal color, but it has these 3 different colored cases along with a teal protective case if you want to use that, just to give it a little bit more color and let the students coordinate their device however they want, right? So if they're in a purple mood that day, they can do that in the same fashion that, I know my wife is one of those people who changes her iPhone bumper case like 3 times a week, just depending on what she likes, right? So giving the student the flexibility to make the device fit who they are is something that we're really excited about too.
That's definitely some important stuff, and we have another device to talk about as well, do we not?
We do. We do. I'm gonna put that over here. All right, Matt, I'm gonna need your visual validation again. How we doing?
You are doing great, right in screen.
Sweet. First shot. I like it. It's called being lucky. So the other device that we're just coming out with now is another refreshable Braille tool. For the longest time from APH, APH consistently would partner with some company or we'd build our own device, but you only had one refreshable Braille option available to you on quota in the education system. And one of the things that we looked at is the more that students need flexibility with mainstream devices and with computers and mobile devices and things like that, tools needed to also be flexible. And so certain people prefer the 8-dot Braille entry and others really prefer the QWERTY keyboard entry. And eventually, if you're going to become employable, you do need to really have that QWERTY keyboard proficiency and that computer proficiency. And what we were hearing from teachers and students throughout the years was that the student was really comfortable on the Perkins keyboard, but they really hesitated to get to that QWERTY input because they really loved their Perkins keyboard device, their 8-dot device. And so moving them off of that device to get them to start to learn their computer keyboarding skills and their computer skills in general was always a sort of an uphill battle. And when we kind of dug to the bottom of that, we learned that it was because oftentimes the refreshable Braille wasn't going with them. Even though those devices with the Braille keyboards could technically connect to, mainstream computers and things like that, oftentimes when a student would go to learn keyboarding or go to learn the Windows operating system or their iPad and things like that, they were leaving the refreshable Braille device in their backpack or in their locker, and they were only using speech, and understandably students resisted that. So Larry Skutkan, who's been at APH over 30 years, I believe it's been, really kind of thought outside the box, and he's been the head of technology for the longest time at APH, and he thought outside the box for many years, and he came up with this idea of combining a 40-cell refreshable Braille display with a full laptop keyboard. And for the longest time, he had a lot of resistance, saying that, well, why do people need this? There's tons of refreshable Braille devices. People like using the Perkins keyboard better anyways. And as time progressed, we realized after hearing from TVIs and students that there were these challenges in the classroom. The project finally got greenlit, and we are excited to talk about the Mantis Q40 today that launched a couple months ago. As you can see, it's a Bluetooth keyboard. I call it a Bluetooth keyboard with a Braille display inside of it, and that's really what it is. Today, Bluetooth keyboards are so widely used with the advent of mobile devices, iPads, iPhones, things like that, Android devices. Being proficient in typing on these devices, you cannot be proficient if you're typing on the touchscreen, right? So, the creation of the Bluetooth keyboard has made inputting text on these devices so much easier. And so the Mantis is essentially a Bluetooth keyboard, but it's designed for blind people. It's got a 40-cell refreshable Braille display at the bottom with cursor, router, keys. It connects to up to 5 different Bluetooth devices at one time. So right now I'm actually using it connected to my computer. You may be able to see even the blinking cursor on the left side here. But I can switch over to my iPad just by pressing the home button, clicking on Bluetooth, and seeing iPad. And now I'm connected to my iPad instantaneously. I can switch right back to my computer by hitting that home button, clicking Bluetooth devices, and finding my Stilson laptop. And now I'm connected to my computer using JAWS at this point, and I can Alt-Tab around, and JAWS is talking. This is the keyboard that I use every day when I'm working, because what's really cool about it is that I can use it in conjunction with JAWS and read Braille when I need to, but at the same time, it's a super comfortable keyboard to type on. It's a full laptop keyboard, so I'm not sacrificing any keys or things like that I normally would have on my laptop. And as Joe said, I can be super lazy and have it on my lap and lay back in my desk chair, and I don't have to be hunched over the keyboard and typing documents or responding to emails, just with always keeping Braille at my fingertips. This product has the same internal applications as the Chameleon, and the same that same internal intelligence. It's got the same USB port on the side and the SD card slot on the back. And what we're excited about is that both these products, the Mantis and the Chameleon, are on quota, so that students can now have the choice, and TVIs can have the choice of what product that they want to really work with their student on, or what product the student wants to work on. If they're maturing in their computer keyboarding and computer skills development, maybe they want to work with the Mantis. Maybe they want to start with the Chameleon when they're younger and move to the Mantis when they're older. That's totally up to you now, because there is choice, and that's something that we are so excited about. It's not a one or the other situation. You have the option of choosing from both of them.
Hey, Greg, just to say one more quick thing about the Mantis is, so when I was working at Humana, one of the things that I always had is, so like I had a 40 cell Braille display, kind of like the Chameleon, but just a little wider. And it was sitting off to the left-hand side of my keyboard. So as I was talking to you about having to read the Braille for phone numbers, email addresses, free text I wrote, etc., I would have to move my hands like across from the keyboard. I'd pick them up over to the Braille display, then back to the keyboard and type over to the Braille display. And it was, for an 8-hour day, it's a lot of just movement that isn't like natural in a sense. Where the Mantis, as Greg pointed out, and as you could see on your screen, the Braille display is right underneath the QWERTY keyboard, so you just drop your fingers down, and it's just so much more natural feeling that I kind of wish I had that back then.
This is really, really good stuff. Really glad that we have these devices that have just come out, and we're all very excited about them. Any chance we get to talk to people about them, we've really enjoyed that opportunity. And we've also enjoyed the opportunity to share a lot with you today. And now at this point in time, it's the chance to ask questions. You can ask questions of one of the panelists or all the panelists, or if you don't specify, we'll just let whoever wants to answer the question go ahead and answer it. And I appreciate, Matt, you just getting that video to whoever it is that's going to talk. So unless you make a specific question to someone, we'll just let whoever wants to speak answer your questions.
Thanks, Paul, and thank you, everybody else. As Paul mentioned, we will now take time for the panelists to answer your questions. Now, I will read your questions out loud for the panelists, but if you would like to submit a question, please remember that you will find the button by tabbing until you find Ask Question, or by using a mouse to find the Ask Question button on the right side of the screen. We'll start out with a question from somebody by the name of Keaton. What was the name of the Braille display that Joe was using?
That was the Chameleon.
Great. Thank you for answering, Joe. Follow-up, this is now a question from Jeff, a parent. You mentioned that it was challenging learning Braille at first. What would you tell kids or other youth that are struggling learning Braille and feel defeated?
I think that was me. Did I mention it was challenging? Probably did.
Yeah, that would have been you. Yep.
That was me. Honestly, so it was challenging partially because I was a low vision kid and I didn't understand why I was learning Braille, right? When I say it was challenging, I think there's also a lot of child immaturity behind that, and things like that. And the reality is, I think it's hard for any kid to learn to read, period, right? And the reality is that I think making helping the blind student or the low vision student understand that they're going through a lot of the same challenges that their sighted peers are in the process of learning to read as well. You're just doing it differently. There's nothing wrong with it, or nothing less good about it, but understanding that everybody's challenged in different ways, and this is one of those challenges that you as a blind student is going to have to overcome. And once that happens, it's going to be much more smooth sailing for you. And it's so funny because I'm sure, as a upper 30-year-old person, it's much easier for me to say that today, right? Would I, as a 6-7-year-old kid, respond well to that. Quite honestly, Jeff, I don't know, and I wish I had the golden ticket to to help that. But I would say that, looking back on it, there was a lot of, I did it because my parents made me, and because my TVI was kind of hard nosed and told me that this is what we're going to do, and that's how I must have responded well enough to that it forced me to do it well. And I look back on it today, and it was the best thing that ever happened to me. So hindsight's 2020 now. So
I'd like to speak to this one also real quick, because my situation's different. I have no vision at all, so it was Braille or nothing for me. Now, there were several times in my life when things were just dropped on me. For instance, at one point, my TVI just basically said, "You're going to start typing all of your assignments." He was not shy about saying, "This is what you're going to do," and not giving me a whole lot of choice in the matter. And I resented it at first, and then I realized later on that he was right. So I would say, please be persistent about teaching children, and maybe they don't understand why they have to do it, and maybe they're going to question, and maybe they're even going to fight you, but please be persistent and push hard, because sometimes that's really the only way that a child's going to do it. They may not like it at first, but like Greg said, that most of the time they're going to look back later on and be glad that you pushed them.
Great, thank you for those answers, and that was a great question as well. The next question comes from Habiba, and it is, do you recommend Braille hard copy or soft copy in your reading?
So for me, personally now, I don't get a lot of paper Braille anymore, to be honest. So the reason being for me is that to get like a Braille book, I'd have to call the library, they'd have to mail it. The older I get, the less I just want to deal with all that. It kind of feels old fashioned. So it's much easier in my lifestyle right now to get on Bookshare, download a book, or NLS, Bard, and download a book in Braille and read it. So for me, I would prefer the refreshing Braille.
I'd like to speak to this too. When I was growing up, a lot of my childhood books were in Braille. I had everything up from, Judy Blume books to the Magic Tree House to adventures like Harry Potter. And then, so those books, especially for kids, are usually in Braille. There are other companies you can go through to get Braille books. So I would say, learning the old-fashioned way first, if you can consider hard copy old-fashioned. But I feel like it's important, especially if you, like we were talking about earlier, the spatial layout of a page. I think it's important for your child to understand that before they receive a refreshable Braille display and they just receive a line of text. Because if they receive a line of text, they're going to be like, okay, this is what a full page of Braille looks like. Well, no, it doesn't. So I would slowly transition them to refreshable Braille. And I don't think any format is better or worse than the other, but emulating an experience that a sighted child has a book, a physical book. So giving them that option first and then showing them what else is out there is something that I would recommend.
Could not agree more. That's you worded it perfectly. Emulating exactly what the student has, the sighted kid has, is perfect. The other thing I found from just a lot of conversations with teachers of the visually impaired and things like that is I got a friend of mine who she starts kids with a combination of hard copy and refreshable Braille at the same time. And she uses hard copy for the purposes that Jess mentioned, right? To make sure that they get the full understanding of spatial orientation and things like that. But she uses the electronic Braille, the refreshable Braille, is a reward for them to progress through their assignments and things like that, to kind of keep them moving, right? It's electronics and devices are fun toys to play with at the same time, right? And little kids don't always know that they're learning when they're playing at the same time, right? So going through and reading a book or reading a couple pages of a book and then showing them that those same pages can also be rendered in just a single line of Braille on a device that has pins that pop up is a really cool sort of way to incentivize them to continue to progress through. So that was one little tip that she passed on, and she started to see a lot of success with that.
Fantastic. The next question, this comes from an anonymous source, but a good question. Does this Braille display work with the Braille-T on Linux?
That's a good question. So it will. We're currently working with Braille TTY to get Mantis and Chameleon recognized. Basically, Braille TTY is an open source library that supports a bunch of Braille displays. It's also the library that's used in Android and Chrome OS devices, and so we do need to make sure that they put that in, and I'm happy to say that we've done our part. Now we're just waiting on them to put it in to their library, and then it will also be supported on Android and Chrome OS devices as well. So we're currently hurry up and wait is really where we're at right now. So hoping that they put that in their next Braille TTY update.
Great. Another question directed, this one is at Greg. Any new technology APH is working on? Can you give us a glimpse as to what innovations you are working on?
I would be happy to. So one of the cool things about being a nonprofit is that I don't have to keep a lot of things hidden anymore. Being a nonprofit, we're really focused on partnerships and transparency. Two of the projects that we're working on, and they're really in the infancy, right? So I can talk about them today, and don't expect to see them for several years yet, but we are very passionate about that full page e-text reader. We believe that is the future, that to be able to render a full page of Braille on an electronic Braille device and be able to show formatting, to show tactile graphics, to show representations that can only be shown in a platform that is larger and around the size of a full page of Braille is a way that we can progress the field further. And at the same time, we can also greatly reduce the cost of production of hard copy Braille, right? The production, I've seen so many numbers flying around, but the production of a math book, for example, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars to produce a Braille math book, right? So if we can create ways of minimizing those costs and creating a device that can be ideally the size of maybe a larger laptop or something like that a kid can carry around in their backpack, that would be our dream device, and we're hard at work on that. We're going to be we've already put out what's called the request for information publicly to all of the vendors in our field and to mainstream companies and things like that to understand what technologies they have, and we're going to be meeting with those who responded later this year to really have sort of a brainstorming session and understand more about their technology and move this forward. The full page refreshable Braille display, refreshable Braille device is going to happen, and it will happen. I really would predict it in the next 5 years or so. I think we're very close to seeing something like that as fast as technology is moving. The other device that we're really passionate about is STEM, a tool for STEM. So being able to come up with a device that has some level of math translation, scientific notation translation, to be able to bring in, imagine being able to bring in a math worksheet on a device that has multiple lines of Braille, not a full page, but multiple lines of Braille, and being able to access that information instantaneously in UEB math or Nemeth math, be able to fill in your worksheet in a spatial orientation that you can understand. As I mentioned, writing those proofs or matrices in enough lines of Braille to be able to do that, and be able to basically send it to your classroom teacher in a fashion that they can read it in print. And that's something that the device would probably have more functions than that, but really that's the nucleus of what we're looking to try to solve is the math and science sort of back and forth exchange. Right now it is so challenging, and there's so much manual work that's done to get a math assignment to a blind student, blind Braille reader, and then get it back from the blind Braille reader in the hands of that teacher in a way that can be simple, right? And there's just there's so many steps behind the scenes that has to happen to make those pieces of the puzzle work. So those are two projects that are really high on the innovation thing. We're working with some partners and vendors to try to come up with the technology to make that happen. And then on the policy side, we're going to need to work with government to be able to fund these projects, because the reality is that these devices are going to be more expensive than the current quota system allows. So on the other side, we're going to have to be, doing all of the politicky things that I run away from, but other people run towards, to increase the quota allotment so that these devices can be funded, right? So that's just a couple of things we're working on. We obviously have way more projects than that, but I'm super excited about really where the field's going and the potential there. And I do want to plug, if you do have ideas, I want to mention that I totally faked out Matt. Sorry, Matt. if you do want to, a lot of people ask, where do these ideas for APH come from? And the reality is we have a system in place where if you go to APH, there's a suggest a product form. Even in the internal products that are created from internal staff at APH, we make every staff member fill out that request a product form. So nothing gets on the quota schedule, nothing gets on our project list without going through that request a product form, and anybody can fill that form out and suggest a product. So I do encourage you, if you have a brilliant idea that we haven't heard of or thought of or anything like that, or you have a need, please fill out a request a product form, even if it's not even an idea that you've completely thought through, right? If it's just some challenges that you see needing to be solved, fill that request a product form out, and it doesn't go to a black hole. It goes to my inbox and several others here at APH's inbox. So please don't hesitate to fill that out. And we'd love to hear some of your awesome ideas, and hopefully would love to get them on a quota.
Neat. Moving on to this next question, which I think is a fantastic one. This one's directed to Jessica. What is your favorite memory of competing in Braille Challenge, and what advice do you have for a finalist?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think my favorite memory of competing at the Braille Challenge, there's so many of them, but I think overall the main overarching memory is just meeting people from all over the world. I mean, when you go to nationals, not all over the world, but all over the US and Canada, when you go to nationals, you meet kids from all ages, all ethnicities, all backgrounds, all abilities. And it's just really cool. And you also get to learn about each and every person and their talents and why they are dedicated to learning the Braille code, why they are passionate about Braille literacy. And it's really great just being able to meet these people, to make friends with them. And I'm also connected with a lot of people that I met through the Braille Challenge, which is amazing. I could probably name maybe 9 different states that I could go to and have a couch to sleep on. So that's really fantastic. And I know this is a cheesy answer, but really having fun at the Braille Challenge is the most important thing. Winning isn't important. It is the friendships the people you meet, and just learning from your mistakes. So if you make a mistake in a test and you come out there all stressed out and you're like, oh no, what am I going to do? Just breathe. Breathe and tell yourself, hey, I did a good job. Hey, I learned from this. And that's the most important thing, because the more you zero in on trying to win or trying to be the best, the more you miss out on the social aspect of the Braille Challenge. Because when you're so engrossed in the academic aspect, you miss out on sitting by the pool with your friends in LA, or you miss that dinner that your friend invited you to because you're worried about studying for the test the next day. So also being part of this cause, right? Promoting Braille literacy is very important, and just knowing that you are part of this great organization is enough to make anybody smile.
Thank you so much. The next question that we want to field is it true that longer Braille displays allow one to read faster, or does that not make a difference?
I can answer this one.
Yeah, please jump in. I don't have any hard data on that, so please.
So I actually, because I'm very what's the word? I'm very conscious of how quickly I read. And when my TVI actually did a reading test on me, Braille reading tests are kind of difficult because first you have to read hard copy Braille silently and then aloud, and then on the display silently and aloud. So your reading speed actually changes depending on the copy of Braille that you're reading, whether it be hard copy or display. So because of that, you don't really have a set speed. If you're used to reading hard copy Braille, you might be faster at that. If you're used to reading on a display, you might be faster than that. But I think with the refresh rate on these displays, it only takes a second or less for it to refresh and for new Braille to pop up. I don't think it matters the cells on there. Now, if you don't want to keep hitting the button to refresh the display, then that'll depend on, or that will I'm tongue-tied, I'm so sorry. So if you don't want to keep hitting the button to refresh the Braille display, then that decides it for you. You'll want a 32 cell or a 40 cell and not a 20 cell. But for convenience purposes, a 20 cell might fit better in your pocket. So I think honestly, your reading speed is not going to be affected based on what you have. It all depends on what you're used to and what you like.
And then, of course, there is the auto scroll feature you could take advantage of, too. So that just makes it a little bit more complicated, right? I really do think it's a lot of preference. If you're reading a really long book, I tend to like a larger Braille display. If we're doing something like what Greg was talking about, PowerPoint, bullet points, I'm perfectly fine with a small display, and that may even be better in that case. So it's common, I would think, for many folks, if they have the ability to do it, to have a larger and a smaller Braille display. But if it's going to be one or the other, I think you need to think about what you're going to be using it for, and just personal preference. I mean, it's Mac versus PC, right? It's Coke versus Pepsi. It's all that. It's just basically comes down to your personal preference.
The one thing I will chime in on here is the if you are doing something that does require spatial or formatting editing in that regard. So I'll give you one example, Microsoft Excel, right? Microsoft Excel can show on a 40 cell Braille display, you can show, depending on how long the cell descriptions are, you can show a couple cells back to back, side by side in one display. One other thing, if you're doing computer programming, it does help to have a little bit longer display to do syntax editing and things like that. So as Paul said, it really depends on what you're going to use it for. If you're going to be focused on those STEM things, I would not buy a 12 or 14 cell device that's going to be a focus for quick notes and things like that. I would look at anything 20 or 40 cells at that point.
Great, and Joe, I'm sorry, was there any comments you wanted to add to that as well?
No, Greg pretty much got it there. I was going to just talk about briefly, like, using even like an 80 cell for computer programming, because that has actually helped me when looking at just code in general. So it really is just going to be a personal preference. I don't think, when it comes to anything, it's about reading speed. I don't think it's going to improve or get better on one display to another. I will say, I recently looked at paper Braille and found myself going, when do I get to turn the page? As I'm going down line by line, because obviously with the Braille display, you're hitting the thumb key, next. But with paper Braille, you're reading until you get to the bottom of the page. So it is a different mindset as well. So.
Nice. The next question. Is the Chameleon a good first refreshable Braille display to buy for my 8-year-old daughter?
I'll start this off. So I think so. I mean, it's very, what I like about it is if you, let me grab it here. So on the front, you have the 4 thumb keys. If you ever get deep into a menu, you have the home key here, the circle. You can push that and get back to the main file structure. It also connects with multiple devices. So it's going to depend on, I don't know if she's obviously, I don't know her Braille reading speed or preference right now, but the Braille on this, it's a small display where tracking and different things are going to be kind of simpler to get used to. So, I mean, I would view this, my first ever Braille device was about the same size as this. It doesn't hardly weigh anything. It's very portable. And, this is fairly durable. So, as kids do, I banged my display around a lot when I was a kid. So I think it's going to hold up over time. But definitely if you can get out, I mean, I know with COVID it's a little harder now, but if you could ever get to a place where you can kind of get your hands on multiple displays, let her play with it and see what she thinks of all the displays out there that you can see, because sometimes just the feel of one versus another is a little different.
I'll just jump in to say that a lot of these devices, right, Braille displays, note takers, they have internal applications, right, and those applications do different things, and they all have a learning curve, and then you add in the external connecting it to an iPad or to a computer and things like that. The thing to keep in mind, and this is something that a lot of the teachers, the visually impaired that I work with, remind me is, you don't have to bite off the whole thing at one time. You can teach your student can bite off small chunks, maybe this month or this week or this next couple weeks. You only work on writing notes or spelling words in your editor, right, and reading them back, and then maybe you add in the component of taking that file and putting it on a thumb drive, and those steps, and then maybe you give your daughter a document that you wrote, and you put it on a thumb drive, and you say, okay, why don't you copy this to your Chameleon so that you can read it tomorrow, and you kind of build this workflow piece by piece. You don't have to do the whole thing at one time, because when you look at these devices and you look at, the more elaborate, Android note takers and things that are out there, right? And there is so much you can do with a lot of these devices. Chameleon is pretty, I'm not going to say pretty limited, but there's really only 4 or 5 things internally that you can do with it. So I would say from a total capacity of what you have to learn, it's probably lesser than that, than what's out there with some of the more expensive and more powerful devices. But even on a device like this, you still probably want to take it one application at a time and really focus on certain workflows or tasks that your daughter is going to be using. And at age 8, they may only have the attention span to do one thing at a time like that. So I would definitely say that we've got 5-year-olds using refreshable Braille devices like this. So at 8, I'm quite confident that she would do just fine.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. Unfortunately, there are a lot of more amazing questions, but we're getting towards the end of our time. So I'd like to turn it back to Paul right now to wrap up and share any final words between him and the other participants.
Thank you very much, Bradley, and all the staff there. That's been extremely helpful getting everything prepared. I want to thank our panelists. They did a great job, as we expected they would. Very useful, helpful information. And feel free to contact any of us. We'd be happy to answer questions for you. If you want to see these products or anything else that we have available, aph.org is the place to go. There's many ways to contact us. You can start there, and we'll be happy to answer any questions that you have. Does anybody else have anything they want to say to end today? I will take that as a negative then and say thank you very much for, and we will wrap this up. Thank you very much, everybody.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much to the American Printing House for the Blind and to our presenters, Greg Stilson, Jessica Minneci, Joe Hodge, and Paul Ferrara for providing such an informative webinar. Now, we're pleased to announce that the new Chameleon refreshable Braille display, which was shared and demoed today, will be a prize awarded to the second place recipients of our Braille Challenge finals. We hope everyone enjoyed, and thank you to all who asked such insightful questions. We have recorded this webinar and it will be posted on our YouTube page, so please visit youtube.com/Braille Institute to access later, and feel free to share this with others. Be sure to follow our social media accounts, facebook.com/Braille Institute Youth and instagram.com/Braille Institute Youth, to stay connected and see more updates, photos, and videos of the remote finals process. Use our hashtags, hashtag Braille Challenge 2020 and hashtag Keep Calm. We will be sending a short post-webinar evaluation survey via email, so please look out for that survey. It helps us a lot if you can respond to the survey, so thank you in advance for your participation and feedback. We have webinars each day this week through Thursday, so be sure to tune in. The 2 remaining webinars in the series are Webinar 3, Access Technology for Blind and Low Vision Accessibility, presented by Dr. Yu-Ting Hsu, Wednesday, July 22nd from 10 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And Webinar 4, Braille Challenge Alumni Panel, presented by Braille Challenge Alumni, Thursday, July 23rd, 12 p.m. to 1:30 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And of course, please, everyone, be sure to tune in to our remote Braille Challenge Finals Award ceremony next Friday, July 31st at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. It will be live streamed through our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Braille Institute. You can visit braillechallenge.org for more info and the link to the live stream. Once again, thank you, APH. Thank you everyone for joining. And congratulations to our Braille Challenge finalists, and we'll see you at our next webinar and at the finals award ceremony.